99347 by Barnet Phillips. This is recorded to celebrate the 9th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. She had something of the dryad in her, though she could not have given it a name. That is to say, as far as the merging a wood nymph into her own personality went. She did not teach mythology in the country school, yet she felt in sympathy with the forest spreading beneath her, and she sorrowed when she saw great scars on the hillside, where hemlock, fir, spruce, and cedar had been laid low. Maybe that was the reason why she had rebuffed George Walter, foreman of the lumbering gang, because he had guffawed when she had once rather diffidently pled for the longer life of a certain sylvan family. "Cut those trees while they are in the sap. It would hardly be worthwhile, Mr. Walter. Let them remain during the summer and fall. When winter comes, if they must go down, then they will at least have lived a short season more, and not quite in vain." "Blessed if that isn't poetry," said Walter. "But see here, we have to chop 'em now, at once, because when winter comes and we are busy, they interfere with haulin'. Now I put it to you, are my teams to suffer, or them blamed trees? Girls with sentimental stuff get mighty queer ideas. One good white pine stick is worth acres of such poor scrub." So George Walter, who really was an honest fellow with no nonsense about him, fell under her displeasure. As she stood on the mountainside that summer afternoon and saw across the valley Walter's destructive work, the air was so still that the ringing of the axes, way beyond, recalled the girl to herself. For all her reverie, she was a practical young woman. The old Canadian blood in her accounted for that. The rivers, brooks, and lakes of the Adirondacks she knew by heart, and to have mastered that much showed a retentive memory. She even smiled at her triumph that very morning, when the school committee had called upon her and approved her work. "I must have a kind of overweening confidence in myself, a sure sign of self-conceit," said the young woman, "and I suppose I shall be hurled off my pedestal before long." A prognostication of an upsetting from one's pedestal, the simile serving to describe a mental accident, if it does come true, is less to be dreaded than an actual physical one, providing you do not break your neck. And all at once, prophecy or no prophecy, the young woman was placed in a very embarrassing position. The conventional and approved romantic resultant of any kind of a glissade, as everybody knows, is a sprained ankle. But this did not happen. Somehow or other, she had landed at some considerable distance below before she knew it, and still she stood fairly firm on her feet. Then she noted that the russet leather on her boots was decidedly green where the moss had been plowed through, but not a shoelace had started. No tag of her skirt hung pendulously, although there might possibly have been a fringe of brambles about its hem. How silly it had been of her not to have gone straight down the hillside, instead of following the treacherous rock path. What was it that had startled her? A fox, a rabbit, or a woodchuck? She was not easily frightened. Where could that monstrous red dog have come from? Considering that she had slid down the face of a rock covered with short moss and slippery with water, she believed at least she had effected her descent in fairly good style. It was not new ground to her, nothing in the way of a surprise, for as far as that hillside was concerned, she was topographically perfect. The slope of the rock was rapid. She knew that it ended abruptly in a small precipice, and then that there was a 4-foot jump to the little plateau below. So, nolens volens, she sped on, but just before bracing herself for the final spring, was horrified to see that the little level place below, hardly larger than a billiard table, had an occupant. "The idea of my becoming a human catapult!" flashed through her mind. "It is the momentum I can't manage, but it's probably some berry picker, and I may upset his or her basket." All this flashed through that young woman's mind during that infinitesimal fraction of a second. Then she knew she had landed without much jar or concussion, though conscious of hearing a sound, something that rattled, as if she had upset a tin butter kettle. That really startled her, and what was worse, an instant afterwards a dog shot past, taking the same precise jump she had accomplished. Next, a man's voice was heard, which said, "You wretched brute!" and, "For gracious sake, are you hurt, miss?" The young woman suddenly recovered herself, repelling now a rather shaky condition on her part. The man offered a camp stool, using gentle force in making her take a seat, then rummaged in his pockets and drew out a flask. He poured a little whiskey in a cup, held it under a trickle of water which filtered from the rock, and said authoritatively, "It's the right thing to do under the circumstances," and he presented the cup. She was not a particularly meek or accommodating young person, but when the cup was placed close to her lips, her arms seemed so limp that she was rather forced to take a sip, but she did make a little grimace after her potation, and next she coughed, and the man seemed delighted, for he said, "I am so glad, for it would be such an uncomfortable place for a faint." He scrutinized her so queerly and looked so pleased at the same time that, although she did her best to resist an inclination to smile, there was the faintest pucker on her lips. So far she had not said a word, only opened her mouth, not very wide, when the cup had been offered her. "Now, you are quite positive you are not hurt, or to use a good English word, bumped? If you are the least hurt, I do not know what else to do, save to run to the house a half-mile below us for assistance, or it may be that I shall have to carry you down. You are not so heavy as to make that impossible." "Oh, oh, oh!" cried the young woman, bouncing out of her camp stool, kicking it over, accidentally, of course, and walking rapidly up and down the narrow little ledge. "I am not a bit hurt, sir." "Well," said the young man, "that was a highly satisfactory kind of a pas seul. Now, will you kindly permit me to beat my dog? Come, you sorry cur, and get thrashed within an inch of your life. That dog, miss, though the most amiable of brutes, never can understand that careering around the whole neighborhood hunting rabbits is at times destructive of intimacy. Instead of sitting quietly at my feet, he is not a bulldog, only a red setter. Stray must needs neglect what is true art and go chasing chipmunks. That was the cause of—" "Of my abrupt presence? But you must spare your dog," said the young woman earnestly, and looking up with eyes full of apprehension. "It is such a natural vent for the emotions to beat something. It's a safety valve." "Come here, Stray," the young woman called, whereupon Stray, who had been skulking in the background as if premeditating flight, wagged his tail, marched up hesitatingly, looking first at his master and then at the newcomer, and finally deciding that the lady looked the more amiable of the two, placed his nose on her lap. "What may I have smashed?" she asked. "You simply left the impress of your heel on the cover of my old tin paint box, which will add materially to its battered value. But it really looks as if you had scattered all my paints." "Pray let me pick them up." And then the two commenced hunting for paint tubes and brushes in the grass, and she was on her knees. "Oh dear, I have broken something or other, for here are splinters of glass," she cried. "Now please don't cut your fingers and bleed to death or something. It's nothing but a wretched old tumbler. Would you oblige me by not bothering yourself to hunt for the colors any more?" "I am glad of one thing," she said. "I just missed pulverizing a pipe. Your pipe?" And she handed him an old black meerschaum, unbroken and stuffed with oil and ashes. Then he laughed. "Since you will not permit me to thrash Stray, I really begin to feel the effects of reaction." "Yes, smoke," said the young woman. "May I?" "You have my permission," she said, though rather shortly. She was beginning to feel a trifle annoyed. "On dirait un procès," said the man to himself, half aloud, noting a slight contraction of her eyebrows. "You forget, sir," she remarked, "that some of us speak French, Canadian French, of course, and I am not a princess." The man put up his pipe during the interval of silence. That incident was seized on by the young woman as a preparation for her departure. She thought it quite time. "You cannot climb up again," he said, and it is not so easy for you to go down. There is rather an ugly lot of flat stones just below that slid from under me as I came up, and a boggy place besides. Don't you think you had a good try to break your neck? Why repeat the act? See here, let this be strictly a telephone business. That is to say, it will help us for an introduction. We will suppose that you are 300 miles away from me. My number is 99347. You are Miss Number 1, and you say through the telephone, "Hello, number 99347, who are you?" And the reply of 99347, don't you forget the number, for there is luck in uneven numbers, is, "A wretched young painter, age 27, studied in France and Belgium, born in the West, lazy, good for nothing, but never, as far as he knows, wanting in civility. He has just got over a big fright and don't want another, and now he feels very contented and is so sorry that number 1 is apparently so much put out. And 99347 don't know what in the devil to do about it. His present business, unless all the rapid slopes of the Adirondacks are preempted, is to make sketches, which sketches will not be signed 99347, but J.B. in one corner, and they will not be paid for at their full value." Would you show number 1 some of your sketches?" said the young person timidly. "Yes, number 99347 will, and if you really want to know who it is—" He paused an instant and added, "Jack Barry." Then he proffered her a seat again and placed his sketch-book before her, attending as she turned the leaves. "Oh, it's Mr. Walter's sawmill I see here, Mr. Barry," and she recognized many other of the sketches. He explained to her the wood scene in New Jersey, the farmhouse in Belgium, and various other things. "Why, these are all made out of doors, and are full of nature itself," she exclaimed enthusiastically. "And, do you know, they remind me vividly of an outdoor sketchbook of J. Francis Murphy's that I had a chance to look through once, and that made a lasting impression upon me." "If you hadn't frightened me half out of my wits, I was just about sketching that withered tree away beyond there. It is touching." "What, my own particular tree? Do finish it, and may I tell you what it looks like to me?" And she gave her impressions, but somehow felt confused and by no means did herself justice. Just half an hour before sundown, the two started down the hillside together, and it was a summer or two later when she said, "Jack, what was your absurd number?" "Bless me if I know. What number, dear?" "What number? Why, 99347, you goose." End of 99347 by Barnet Phillips.